Hello, everybody, and happy Monday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmelk, Lance Meta with you. The phone number is 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. We'll take your calls, maybe some predictions tonight, whatever you want to do. Give us a call and talk some Giants football. Lance, how was your football Sunday?
It was good. A very eventful day in the NFL, especially based on the results and the movement, but we're still very jammed on the bottom tier in both the AFC and the NFC. That's why you win one game, you lose one game in the span of a week. You could drop from 7th to 13th in the blink of an eye.
Yes, and I will just say this. Obviously, at 4-8, I'm not saying the Giants are a playoff team, but it's amazing that if they win tonight, they're literally one game behind 3 or 4 teams for that last wild card spot, some of which being the Packers tonight and the Rams on New Year's Day. They're going to play, before the season's over, so you have a chance to get the tiebreaker in those head-to-head matchups, and improve your standing. So it really is amazing. We knew after you got through those elite teams in the NFC, it would be tough finding those last 2 wildcard teams. And really, and this doesn't happen that often, Lance, it's turned out to be exactly what we thought it was going to be. Those last couple wildcard teams are going to be at or around 500, maybe a little below, maybe a little over, and the NFC playoff picture is going to go down to the wire.
Well, there was a lot of quarterback changes in the NFC this year, so I think that's pretty much why we've seen a drastic turnaround in terms of maybe there's not as much depth in that conference as there is in the AFC. You look at the teams that are battling. The Vikings lost Kirk Cousins. Green Bay has a young quarterback in Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers is not there anymore. The Rams, they got Matthew Stafford back, but he hasn't necessarily been in the lineup. The Seahawks were without Geno Smith the other day. Drew Lock started against the Niners. Atlanta has Desmond Ritter. And the Saints, Derek Carr's been very banged up.
And the Panthers have a rookie quarterback,
yeah,
right?
I mean, well, Carolina's all the way at the bottom.
They're a mess,
they're not
correct, yes.
even in the vicinity. But the point is, I just read off everybody from 6 down that is mathematically in the hunt. And I think the common element there, John, is a lot of those teams have not had stability under center. Yeah. And we could do the same exercise in the AFC. You're going to find a similar outcome.
Yeah, and we talked about the AFC, how challenging it was going to be. And we'll get to the game in a second. Lance did his full go-through on Friday. Go check out Big Blue Kickoff Live for that. I'll give you my couple basic keys to the game, and then we got a full bank of calls. We'll get to those on the phone here in just a little bit. You know, we talked about in the AFC, Lance, how there were so many top-of-the-line quarterbacks in that conference. It was going to be hard to keep people out. You know, in the NFC, we're talking about trying to find teams for that last playoff spot. Well, the AFC, it was hard to say, well, this team's not going to make it. Well, look what's happened, right? Bengals, Joe Burrow hurt.
Though Browning's played very well the last 2 games.
He has played really well. They were out of it already anyway, but Justin Herbert has broken his index finger. On your throwing hand, that's a multiple-week injury, so he's out.
Probably a season-ending injury.
Aaron Rodgers, Jets, he's out, right?
That changed their fate.
Anthony Richardson, Colts, he's out. They're still in the playoff picture. Deshaun Watson, Browns, out. I mean, you just go through the line here, and I know I'm missing at least 1 or 2 other guys here. You know, Trevor Lawrence, we thought he was going to miss multiple games with a high ankle. I can't believe he played this week. I don't know how he did that. It's amazing. They didn't win the game.
Pittsburgh's another team that's been...
Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett out, right? Correct, Mitch Trubisky, and thank you.
Yep.
So all these injuries at the quarterback positions in the AFC has now made that playoff picture just as muddy. The teams all have slightly better records than the teams in the NFC in the NFC do that are vying for those last couple of spots. But it's a mess. You have, for 2 or 3 spots, you have like 6 or 7 teams still in the mix. One with Josh Allen as their starting quarterback. You have the Bengals, who were an AFC championship team for many years. It is really competitive. It's going to be a fun final 4 weeks of this regular season.
Well, you have 6 teams that are 7-6 right now in
That's
the
what I'm
AFC.
saying.
And that takes you all the way down to the 11th spot, which is where Buffalo sits right now. And the Bills have also been very much up and down. And they actually have had consistency, unlike the other teams.
Right.
Josh Allen's been in the lineup, but there's been other elements that have changed.
Injuries
They've lost
on
guys
defense.
on defense.
Yeah.
Matt Milano at linebacker. And on offense, everything hasn't necessarily been in sync. But I think the major storyline in the NFL this year is the abundance of injuries at quarterback.
Yeah.
Some teams have dealt with it very effectively. Other teams have struggled. So I don't think there's major surprises from that standpoint.
Oh, now C.J. Stroud hurt yesterday, by the way. Another
we'll
one.
see.
So
I mean,
him.
I'm assuming it's a concussion, which shouldn't be keeping him out very long. But
even if it's 1 week,
a week could change things. And they're also, forget wild card. They're in the mix for the division title still because Jacksonville is not necessarily running
so
away
are
with
the
things.
Colts. And Gardner, look, you've been pushing Gardner Minshew for a couple of years. This has been a really good job out of him to keep the Colts in the mix here in the division.
Well, the reason why I liked the Minshew fit in Indy is Shane Steichen brought him over from Philly. So there's that familiarity component. I thought Minshew was one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL last season. Here he has an opportunity to start again. Remember, he started for several seasons in Jacksonville. If anybody learns anything from this past season, I would argue 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Drew Brees went down, Teddy Bridgewater filled in, he went 5-0. We've seen other instances where the value of a backup quarterback.
You've always been a huge proponent of this.
It's becoming more and more
100%.
prominent. So you could be a team where you could take the time to say we're going to carve out space in the salary cap and make sure we have a Tyrod Taylor or a Gardner Minshew, or you could prepare accordingly to groom a young guy so that you feel comfortable. Or you could completely abandon ship and be left with an absolute mess once your guy goes down. So there's three options in today's NFL. We've seen some teams do it effectively, and other teams say, we'll address it when we need to. And if you choose the latter over the former, you're probably going to be on the outside looking in at the playoff picture.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the theme really is if you do lose that starting quarterback, might you have a chance to squeak out a 500 record or something like that? Sure. But are you ever really going to compete for a title? Probably not. If you look at the teams that are at the top of the standings, they're the guys.
Sure.
They're the teams that have their starting quarterbacks, right? And again, the other teams might figure out a way to get into the playoffs. They might, if you're in the NFC South or the AFC South where the divisions really aren't that strong, you might have a chance to figure it out, but you're still probably not going to compete at the highest level, which is the argument that's contrary. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So if you don't care if you're 7-9 or 8-8 or 4-13 or whatever it is now with the 17 games. Now, I don't think teams and owners feel that way, and they shouldn't. I know the Giants don't feel that way. That's why they have Tyrod Taylor here. And, of course, they've developed Tommy DeVito. They've kind of taken both of those paths that you talked about. So, you need continuity at quarterback, and you frankly need high-level play at quarterback. If you're going to compete for a championship, look at the teams that we're talking about as title contenders, Lance. We're talking about the Dolphins, who have Tua playing really high-level football, the Ravens, Lamar Jackson playing high-level of football. I'll also throw the Chiefs in there, even though they've lost a couple games in a row with Patrick Mahomes. Talk about in the NFC, the Niners with Brock Purdy, who's playing at the near MVP level, at least in terms of the numbers. Dak Prescott playing at an MVP level, and Jalen Hurts playing at a really high level. And then Jared Goff, if you want to throw the Lions into the mix too, he's playing well. So those are no surprise, the teams with the best record in the league, you look, those are the teams that have had their top-level quarterback be healthy all year and play well. Not a huge surprise.
Yeah, I mean, the only example that I would throw out is the year that Philly loses
with
Carson
Nick Foles,
Wentz.
right.
They did have Nick Foles, and
Correct.
He was an experienced quarterback. And, hey, there was a
You're
lot
right
of
about
talent around him, but they also lost a lot of players. They lost Jason Peters that year, Darren Sproles, linebackers, kickers, you name it. So there's always exceptions. And I'm not saying that's not the norm, though. That's not what I'm arguing. Mm-hmm. But what I am arguing is that you can perhaps remain competitive. And I think another aspect in play here, and maybe the Bengals are the best example of this.
You used a great phrase, by the way. It's about keeping the ship afloat. I think that's what you're trying to do.
But also, I think the Bengals, what I was going to say is, if you can scheme accordingly, I think they've done a heck of a job putting Jake Browning in a position to succeed. Okay,
Zach Taylor's done a really nice job.
Most teams, you give them Jake Browning, I don't know if they're going to have the same level of success. I think it says a lot about the coaching staff, what they're asking him to do, the talent around him. Of course, it helps when you have Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, but that also is a big part of the equation. You see who the effective coaches are in the NFL when you take away a starting quarterback.
Hey, look what the Giants have done with Tommy DeVito. They've figured out a way for him to be an effective quarterback.
Yeah.
Has he been a star?
Competitive at least. Yeah.
But he's played well. He hasn't turned the ball over. It hasn't been a disaster. And when you're down to your third-string quarterback that's an undrafted free agent and you're playing competitive games and he's not, completely sinking your games, that's a good job by the coaches, to your point. Absolutely, 100%. All right, 877-337-6666. Again, if you want Lance's full spiel game preview, check out Friday's episode with Tino. Big Blue Kickoff Live. You've probably heard it already. Real quick, Lance, on this game for me. I love, breaking down all the numbers and tendencies and stuff with the Packers. I think it's really hard to look at the Packers' overall numbers this year and get a true sense for the team because they really didn't start hitting their stride till about halfway through the year, maybe week 5 or 6 when they started playing their best football, week 7. So their numbers are not going to look as good as the level that they're playing now. They're kind of in the middle league offensively. They're a little bit worse than that defensively. But the way they've played the last 4 weeks has been really good. Jordan Love is playing really good football, and I realize Christian Watson's not there tonight, and that's going to hurt them, but they have other good young wide receivers that can play.
And they may get Aaron Jones back.
We'll see. There were reports over the weekend that they're not sure he's ready yet, but we'll see.
He was limited in practice.
Yeah. Otherwise, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones is technically questionable. Quay Walker doubtful, by the way, on defense. That could be a loss for them. And Dexter Lawrence officially questionable for the Giants. That's a huge one to keep an eye on in this game. Obviously, he could be argued that he's the Giants' best player. So keep an eye on that, too, as you get closer to game time here. Dexter was limited throughout the week. We'll see if he's able to suit up and go. But a couple key matchups here, Lance, that I would keep an eye on real quick. Packers, last 4 games, you talk about their overall numbers not being reflective of the type of team that they are. Well, they're the 3rd worst rushing defense in football. That is reflective of where they are. They've given up 140 rushing yards 4 straight games. All right, they have a lot of trouble stopping the run. Now, my bet would be that the Packers are going to say, well, this is a special circumstance, right? You have Tommy DeVito, a quarterback, who does a nice job, but you're going to make him try to carry the Giants in this game, and you're going to say, well, we're going to put as many resources as we can to stop Saquon Barkley. So we'll see if they alter their approach and how many guys they put on the box and stuff like that to try to slow down Saquon and force Tommy DeVito to beat them. But if they stick with the usual game plan, it could be a huge Saquon game. Just the way they've defended the run, it has not been good this year. I think that's important. The Packers have not given up big plays, second fewest passes of 30-plus yards this year. So they do a good job of keeping things in front of them, which is kind of what their defense is based around, which is why I don't think they're quite as good against the run. And then offensively, it might not be names, folks, but Romeo Doubs is a really good, I think it's strong to call him a possession receiver, but he's not like a super dynamic run after the catch type of guy, but he runs good routes. He has good hands. He makes some contested catches. And then you have Jaden Reed, who's got juice. He can run. They line him up all over the place, inside, outside. He can get deep. They throw those little wide receiver screens to him for runs after the catch. They'll run him. They'll use end arounds with him, stuff like that, jet sweeps to try to get him the ball. He's their playmaker. He's the guy that I would, of all the playmakers in the game for Green Bay, he's the guy I would circle and say, this is the guy that scares me the most. He's got the most juice. I keep an eye on him. Under the radar, the Packers' offensive line has been phenomenal this year. And that's, think about it. They lost David Bakhtiari. Yeah. They put Rasheed Walker in there at left tackle. He's been really good. Zach Tom at the other tackle spot, who got, people thought he was going to be a center coming out. And he's done a really good job at tackle. He was a tackle in college. Their offensive line has done a nice job. And then defensively for the Packers, I talk about the run defense. Well, they have one really good pass rusher in Rashawn Gary, who's elite. I'd call him a top 10 pass rusher in the league. He's that good. He lines up over right tackle where the Giants are going to have a backup player, Tyree Phillips there. I think they'll probably help a lot on that side. But here's the problem. They have multiple guys, Lance, that can get after the quarterback. Kenny Clark is an interior rusher. He's good. Devontae Wyatt, second-year player out of Georgia. He's a good pass rusher. You have Preston Smith, a guy who's done this for a long time and is a good player. He'll be lining up over Andrew Thomas for most of the game. And then I even mentioned Lucas Van Ness, who we knew was a raw player. Remember, he didn't even start in his final year at Iowa, and he was kind of a raw pass rusher, but he had a sack last week against, I believe it was the Chiefs' left tackle in that game. And you see the physical traits with him that, he's going to develop into somebody good the same way Rashawn Gary has been. So I think you got to stay out of those third and longs, run the football, don't get behind in this game, don't let that Packer pass rush start to eat. And that's kind of how I look at this game.
I think that if I'm the Packers, the reason why I'd be more willing to change up the defensive scheme and philosophy from Joe Barry is because Tommy DeVito is very different than what you've played the last 3 weeks at quarterback. And I think that has to be taken into consideration during this 3-game winning streak. Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes. Those are the last 3. And even if you want to go back to week 9, because they've won 4 out of the last 5, Matthew Stafford was week 9.
Yep.
So we're talking about opposite ends of the spectrum. I would say, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Oh, it'd be crazy not to,
emphasize stopping Saquon. You tell Tommy, beat us. And then, hey, if Tommy makes the throws, you make adjustments. Yeah. But I would take a very similar approach that Bill Belichick and the Patriots did, which is they said,
I would do the same thing.
Saquon, you're going to be the guy that we're not going to allow to wreck this game. And Tommy made some throws, to his credit. Let's see if he could do it again. So that's my philosophy.
I agree, and this is why I think how the Giants start this game is interesting. If they come out, and obviously as an offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka up in the booth, he's going to look to see what those fronts are looking like at Green Bay, what their pre-snap alignment is. If he does see what both of us think the Packers are going to do early in this game, where they're putting 8 guys up there, they're trying to get the numbers advantage, do you then try to throw the ball early a little bit to take advantage of those looks, or do you stay stubborn and like, well, no, they're not good against the run. Saquon's our best player. We're going to run it and see if we can beat those heavy fronts. And I think we saw that the last couple of games. Fans have gotten upset. I don't understand why you're not running Saquon early in this games. Why aren't you running Saquon early in the games? Well, you see how the defense is aligned, and do you want to run into their strength? Do you want to try to play into what they're trying to defend? So I'm curious to see how the Giants look at it today. Do they try to throw early, like frankly they have the last couple of games with Tommy DeVito, because you suspect the other team's going to come in and try to blow up the runs? You run some play action, do some quick throws, get Tommy DeVito into a bit of a rhythm, or do you try to run into their strength because Saquon's your best player, and frankly the Packers' rush defense has been poor this year? So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic early in this game to see how the Giants attack them.
I would say the middle ground is use Barkley more as a receiver.
Sure.
And that could be an extension of the run game.
And they did that a couple weeks ago,
you
right?
dump it off to him for 4 yards. What's the difference whether you give it to him on the ground or you throw it to him in the flat and then he tries to test perhaps the middle of the defense? The other wild card here that we didn't bring up is, and this is Mike Kafka's thinking I'm taking into consideration, if Jair Alexander plays, I think that does change whether or not I want to test them down the field. Because if Jair Alexander, who's missed the last 4 games, he's missed 7 overall, and when he spoke to the media, he was really keeping it close to the chest. He was even admitting to reporters, I would lie to you even if I was fully healthy or I was hurt.
Yeah, and he said he's coming back this year, but Monday night was kind of left up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's 50-50 in terms of whether or not Alexander's going to play. He was limited like Aaron Jones all week. But
and Eric Stokes, too, their other cornerback.
Stokes just came off of IR, and he's only appeared in 1 game this
Yep.
season. So that could give them at least a little bit more of a veteran presence. But
by the way, in a familiar form, a full name for the Giants at corner, Corey Ballantyne
sure.
is there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
They have a Valentine and a Ballantyne out there at quarterback.
Exactly. I brought that up on Friday. Carrington Valentine is the rookie who they have. But you throw Jair Alexander into the equation, it does change things. And Keyshawn Nixon is the nickelback
He's
position.
done a nice job for them.
Yes, but he's also not the most experienced corner. He's mainly a special teams guy. Yeah. So you have Nixon and Alexander with Ballantyne versus Ballantyne and Valentine and Nixon. That changes, to me, the thinking of Mike Kafka and how he wants to approach this Packers secondary. So let's see if Alexander's on the field. If Alexander's on the field, then I would say I'd then test the Packers early on with Barkley more as a receiver and see whether or not you can make some inroads there.
201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Join us on Sunday, December 17th at Tommy's Tavern in Clifton, New Jersey to watch the Giants take on New Orleans. Enjoy Modelo drink specials, meet a Giants legend, and enter a raffle to win game tickets and more. Visit Giants.com/Barn Network to learn more. And go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast, folks. Got a lot of good stuff up on there right now. That podcast is presented by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. A couple really good interviews this past week. Friday's preview, Lance talks to Matt Schneidman, correct?
Matt Schneidman, correct.
From The Athletic. He covers the Packers on that same episode. I have like a 10, 11-minute interview with Tommy DeVito, who's starting for the Giants on Monday night. We talk about some good stuff. He kind of gets deep into how the Giants go about trying to develop a young quarterback, which I thought was interesting, something he hasn't been asked a whole lot about. So check that out. Bob Papa with Brian Dable as well. And then Lance, I didn't realize you did like a full hour with him.
Oh, yeah.
He did a full hour with Bob Angelo, who is a former producer and cameraman from NFL Films, and he has some really good stories in that podcast about covering the Giants, stories from Giants players and around the league as well. So go check it out. A lot of good stuff in the Giants Huddle podcast. Make sure you go tune in. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Frankie in Putnam County, New York. Frankie, what's going on?
Oh, I just had delicious leftovers from Thanksgiving with biscuits and gravy while I was on hold. Can I give you just a thing on the standings and then ask your thoughts on the bye week?
Yeah, Frankie, that's great, but I'm just curious, man. What were you storing those Thanksgiving leftovers in, man? Like, that's a while. They were still good? It's been like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, good. We have more time than WFAN. Real fast. Mommy put them right away Friday in that good Tupperware.
Nice.
And locked them in the Friday after Thanksgiving. She's great at that. Real resourceful.
Very good. I like it.
They came out actually better than they were the day we had it. But anyway. Yeah, on the standings, and just to qualify before we talk about the standings, the Seattle Giant tiebreaker, remember, and it's amazing we can even talk about this, that Seattle has one more less loss than the Giants right now, but that's the cool thing about sitting around for 3 weeks, winning a couple games. You watch the league come back to you. That head-to-head tiebreaker gets eradicated, right, if you pull a third team in.
Yes.
Or they break ties in division for, like, let's say Rams kick out Seattle.
That's correct.
hopefully Giants in 3 weeks beat the Rams. But, on all this thought, it's amazing how much the Giants, starting tonight, are going to have a say in what that bar is for the win total for that final wild card spot, seeing that Minnesota and Green Bay are only at 6 and 7 wins each. So they'll have, they've got the Saints coming up, and we talked about the Rams a couple seconds ago. The Giants hold the key to what that final win total will be. They can win these games, a lot of work to do, and set themselves up and get to 8-9, and that's probably going to be the bar. If Giants don't win those games, if they don't win those games, the bar is definitely going to be higher. But it's funny that it's the Giants and the Bears right now that are holding the key to whether if that bar is low and if it stays low, because they're playing all those teams.
And by the way, Frankie, the Giants will also impact what the top of the NFC playoff stands and because they have the Eagles twice.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do think, though, somebody's going to get to 9 wins. I find it hard to believe that 8 will be the bar. Yeah.
I think the 6th spot does, but I don't think the 7th does, because remember, Minnesota and Green Bay have to play each other, and Minnesota's got a brutal
I actually
schedule.
agree with Frankie. I think the last team in the NFC will win 8.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's a gut. And frankly, I've been saying that for weeks, so I'll just stick with what I've been saying. But would it shock me if someone gets to 9? No, but I do think it's realistic that perhaps a team with 8 is the final playoff spot.
Well, I mean, Minnesota right now is the 6th. Green Bay is the 7th. If Green Bay wins tonight, they get to 7.
We even mentioned
4 games to go.
We even mentioned Kirk Cousins' injury. We missed
correct.
that one. That's another crazy
No, I mentioned that when I was going through the bottom of the NFC. So, I mean, I don't think 9 is that much of a stretch, but hey, it's possible
No, it's not a stretch.
that 8 could get it done. I think that'll say a lot about the state of the NFC.
Yeah, and frankly,
a team with 8 wins gets in.
And I'm going to say this too. Look,
what, John?
You're 100% right of everything you're saying. The Giants so far this year have beaten literally 3 of the 5 worst teams in football. If you look at the draft order for next year, go to wherever you want to go to check it out. The Patriots, the Cardinals, and Washington twice. Yep. They literally have those 3 teams have 3 of the top 4 picks in the draft if the season ends today, heading into next year. So the Giants are going to have to earn this, right? They have to show that they can beat a higher class of team. So are the Saints, the Rams, and the Packers, are they the Niners? Are they the Eagles? Are they the Cowboys? No, they're not those teams. But they're certainly
a step above.
Correct, right. So that's what kind of has me excited here, that the Giants are going to have to prove that they can beat a higher class of team to earn themselves into this conversation.
So
you know
let me
ask
you something. So now the bye week now, this is where that comes into interesting play here. Now, early in the year, usually byes hurt teams, but could this bye week now, the Giants had a chance to watch Green Bay against Kansas City, like you pointed out. Kansas City was really pushing them around on the ground, and Kansas City went too cute there. A lot of 50-50 balls. They probably didn't have to do that. Giants watching that game, sitting around at home. They've been at home now for 3 weeks? 2 games a game at home they won.
Yep.
Week off. Now, but getting some guys back on the line. John Michael Schmidt is do I got that right?
John Michael Schmidt. Yes.
Yeah. He's got another 2 weeks now of healed. I think Thomas is even more healed now. I think Neil. I don't know if Neil's coming back.
No, he's still out tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, but the point is, does this bye week now get them to play even better than they played when they eked out those 2 wins?
Well, they're going to have to.
Teams?
Yeah, they're going to have to. No question, Frankie.
I mean, the reason why...
Appreciate the call, man. Good stuff. Excellent call.
Thank you. Good talking to you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I would point out, remember, they played the Niners earlier this season on a Thursday. They had ample time to study the Seahawks and got completely outplayed in that game. So it could go both ways.
And to his point, on
like
the Chiefs game, Lance, going back to what you said before, when you go and play the Chiefs, who's the first guy you circle on your scouting report? It's not Jerick McKinnon.
No.
Yeah. It is Isaiah Pacheco. It's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. So you're going to sacrifice some stuff on the ground to try to slow those guys down.
Well, that's why I brought up Herbert and Goff. You got to look at who they played
100%.
at quarterback. Yeah.
So I think we'll see. But Frankie, look, the Giants have an opportunity here to at least make the last month interesting if they can figure out how to win these games. But they have to beat better teams than they've beaten all year. And they haven't shown they can beat teams at this level yet. Well, now here's your chance. Here's your opportunity to do it.
And they still need to score more points. I mean, we've been talking about this all season long, John.
100%.
I mean, that's the key. As good as the defense has played and as opportunistic as this group has been.
At times, because they've had some rough games, too.
Well, I was going to say, though, you also can't expect 9 takeaways to continue, which they've had in the last 2 games. You can't go into games thinking you're going to win 10-7. Not when you're playing the way Jordan Love is playing with 8 touchdowns and no interceptions the last 3 games. And they've gone up against good competition. Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Jalen Hurts. These teams, okay, are they going to score 30? No. But can they get to 21, 22 points? I don't think that's crazy, which means you've got to get to 23, 24. And the Giants, unfortunately, have not proven they could do that consistently.
Yeah, and that's what comes down to being better teams. Well, there's a reason those teams are at the bottom of the standings, right? They can't score. It's the way it is. Though I should say the Giants did put a 30 spot on Washington and Arizona, so they did score in 2 of those games.
Sure, but remember, one of the Washington games you had a defensive score too.
Correct.
So
absolutely.
The offense wasn't responsible for the full 30.
The other game was, 14-7? Does that sound right? The other Washington Giants game? Was that the final score on that one? I think it was, right?
Yes.
2-1,
14-7. It was all in the first half.
4-5-1-3. Let's go to Joe in Pennsylvania, and then we'll get to Jay in Phoenix. Joe, what's going on?
Just watching the games like everybody else yesterday and back and forth. I'm looking at these teams like the Rams, the Bears, the Vikings, and I'm looking at them. Do I want them to win? Or, well, they're winning. Oh, maybe I want them to lose. Well, either way, because then we get the draft pick.
Well, no, Joe, here's the thing, and you're right. Here's the tricky part, too, when you do this. There are so many teams in front of the Giants right now. While it's only 1 game, it's 6 teams. So that's a lot of teams that you're going to have to try to compete with and jump, which makes it a little bit of a tougher go as well.
All I want us to do is to get better, that we play good ball there. If we win or lose tonight, I want us to play a good game, you know what I mean? Because in a couple weeks from now, I want us, no matter somehow or whatever, if we can't beat the Eagles, I want us to out-physical them. I want them to put a beating on them. I was just so happy for them to lose yesterday. It made my day. So
even though it was the Cowboys, Joe? Well, I get it. You're in Pennsylvania. I get it.
I don't have to deal with as many Cowboys fans as
fair.
Eagle fans. They just get me. It's the Eagle fans. So and hey, let's put it this way. The Cowboys did do a number on us this year and last year, but the Eagles are killing us every year. And I look at that, how can we beat Washington? And Washington, well, not this year, but even this year, but they play a much better game than we do against the Eagles.
It's matchups, Joe. It's a weird league. No, Joe, you're right. It's a strange league. I believe it was 38-31 and 34-31, the 2 Eagle Commander games this year. And it's just matchups makes fights, man. It's just kind of the way it is.
And Washington beat them last year and everything, and we beat Washington twice, and they run all over us. I just want us to get better. I said, if nothing else, that we can compete with them. Physically, I want to give them a beating.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, Joe, it starts in the trenches. If you go back to last night's game, Dallas won the battle on the offensive line and the defensive line. They got to Jalen Hurts, and they were able to run the ball effectively. I mean, that's your answer. You're going to know based on how the Giants' fronts hold up against Philly. That's what's going to determine whether or not that happens.
And then I was looking like last year. We beat the Packers last year, but look at the Packers are really coming on, but they're newer players. It's a newer league,
younger team,
newer team. And I was looking at this year, our comparison. Are we better than last year at this time? Now I look, the big difference, I guess, maybe would be Daniel Jones at quarterback. And I'm not taking anything away from Tommy DeVito. The way he has played for the little time that he's been in there. I look at him. To me, he could play as good as he could develop as good as that Brock Purdy for the 49ers if you put him into his system. When I look at them both looking up at one another, they remind me about the same size he is as his, and he might have as strong as an arm as that Brock Purdy. It's maybe just experience and getting in the system. I'm not sure, but I give him credit for the time he's been in there.
Joe, I would say physical traits. I think Purdy and DeVito were similar, but what makes Purdy special is his ability to process and kind of get through all those reads in Kyle Shanahan's system so quickly and always get the ball to the right guy, even if it's like the 3rd or 4th read. You say experience, and part of that's experience. You're right. also part of that's just innate. Not everybody can do that as quickly and as consistently as Purdy can. So I don't think we know yet if Tommy has that innate mental ability.
That's what I'm saying. For that little bit of time that he's been in there, you know what I mean? I have to give him credit. You just don't know.
Absolutely.
He could. Hey, one other thing before we get out of here again, I have to bring up here our buddy Toney again. Did you see what happened to him yesterday in the game?
Yeah, where he lined up on the line of scrimmage.
Gosh.
Yeah, I said it. And what did we get in the third for him? I keep looking again. He always does have problems with drops or penalties.
I think he did that with the Giants in one game, too. He lined up offsides, if I remember right. I think I remember that being called against him here.
He has all the ability. Our coaching staff and that couldn't get along with him and with his injuries and stuff. All the ability in the world it seems he has, but boy, he just always keeps. He's in the limelight with things happening. What did we get in the third?
We got a third-round pick. It was just a third-round pick that you then traded for Darren Waller. So it was basically a Toney for Waller swap, for lack of a better comparison.
Who's playing tonight? I guess we have to wait till the injury report comes out for sure.
Well, I mean, right now tonight, Waller is not out. Waller's still out. He's not even activated off of IR yet, so he's not.
His clock hasn't started yet.
Evan Neal is out. Questionable is Dexter Lawrence, Ashawn Robinson, Isaiah Simmons, Daniel Bellinger, and Paris Campbell. Yeah. Bellinger's an illness, so I got to imagine he's going to figure out a way to play.
According to Renan, Dex is playing.
Jordan Renan's reporting that Dexter Lawrence is going to play. Thank you, Dom. I appreciate that. Good stuff. And then for the Packers, real quick, Jair Alexander, the starting cornerback's questionable. Eric Stokes, another one of their starting cornerbacks, so he's been out most of the year, as Lance said earlier. He's questionable. Their safety, Darnell Savage, who's also a really good big part of their secondary. He's questionable. And then Aaron Jones is questionable. Quay Walker, doubtful, and Christian Watson, their wide receiver, is out. So the Packers are missing some significant pieces.
Well, I hope we can just play a good game against them because they're playing good ball. You know what I mean? So we play a good game against them. Maybe it'll go our way, and then we get ready to beat the Eagles there at least once or so. Because who knows, with the draft picks, if we pick 5th or 10th or 7th or 8th, who we take just might make the difference at any position. So,
you don't know who's going to be on the board. There's so much unknown, and you can win one week and then you lose the following week, and all of a sudden your draft position changes. So, that's why most players and coaches, and appreciate the phone call, just say, well, add up all the wins and losses, and we'll see where we stand at the end of the year, because there's a lot of validity behind that. It fluctuates. Look at the playoff standings. It changes. Look at the NFC South. Every week it's a different division leader because everyone's hovering around 500. So you go 1 week, you're in the driver's seat. The next week you lose a game. All of a sudden you're completely out of the playoffs. You'd be driving yourself crazy going through all of these mathematical equations.
I'd say, Lance, the Packers right now are playing better than they did at any time last year. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think that's a fair synopsis based on Jordan Love's play. I think he's playing his best football. I think the young receivers are coming along. Rashawn Gary is just a little over a year removed from a torn ACL. Remember, at this time, he was sidelined, so you didn't have him in the equation. Yeah, I think if you add up all the pieces, special teams with Keyshawn Nixon, they've got a young kicker, though. They don't have Crosby anymore, so that changes things a little bit, and we'll see how Anders handles the winds and the cold weather here at MetLife Stadium. But, yeah, all in all, I think it's fair to say that the Packers probably are a better team than where they were in London at this time last year.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Jay in Phoenix. He's up next. We have some open lines, folks, who want to get in, by the way. Jay, what's going on, pal?
Thanks, guys. I'll be quick. I appreciate Joe bringing up Kadarius Toney. He's just the gift that keeps on giving to us Giant fans. We're happy to see him go.
Be careful with the Schadenfreude, man. Be careful with that. Yeah. You know how it goes.
And remember, the Chiefs did win the Super Bowl last year, so let's not forget about that. Okay,
and he actually made a couple plays.
He made a huge play. He made a huge play. And to be also fair, and listen, I understand Giants fans, they don't hesitate in terms of throwing some old guys under the bus, but Waller has to prove he can stay healthy too to see how that trade pans out as well. Remember, you want to be able to capitalize off of Waller's play, and that hasn't necessarily come to fruition.
I agree with that 100%. But anyway, so going on to, you guys are talking about the mediocrity of the NFL, and I think what it's really proven this year is it's so interesting how tight the talent gap is, but the key, I think, is the depth gap. if you don't have depth, quality depth, you are done. And I think that's probably the biggest difference between this Giants season and the last season is the amount of injuries. And, we always say that injuries aren't an excuse, but frankly,
they're a reason.
It seems there is a reason why teams don't perform. We're on our third quarterback, and I love Tommy DeVito. I think it's a great story, made the games interesting again, the team interesting again for the rest of the season.
Even more than the quarterback, it's the offensive line injuries the first 7-8 games. Where they literally had a different lineup in there every time. Lance was playing his game in musical chairs on the offensive line. Your best player, Andrew Thomas, was out. Your starting center, John Michael Schmitz, was out. It was a mess. I mean, again, I remember going into that Bills game, of the guys they had on the initial 53, they had 9 offensive linemen. There were only 3 left standing and available to play in that game against Buffalo. I mean, It's impossible for any NFL team in a league where quality play and quality players on the offensive line is probably the hardest thing to find in this league, especially at offensive tackle. No NFL team could survive that. It's impossible. You just can't. And then throw in the fact you lost Saquon Barkley for 2 or 3 games, because 2 games because of that injury. And it adds up. It just adds up, and it makes it very hard, especially when you're playing a lot of tough teams early in your schedule.
Do you anticipate the tackles in football changing? Because when Osi Umenyiora was overseas in Nigeria and Western Africa looking for players and things like that, and part of the NFL abroad program, you're looking at the athletes that are playing defensive end or edge rusher, and they're huge, they're tall, they're heavy, they're fast, they're super athletic.
They might be the best all-around athletes of any player in any sport. These guys are 260 pounds, running 4.49s. It's ridiculous.
They're the best athletes on the planet, if you think about it. Do we anticipate offensive linemen having to go that route? Because you look at Andrew Thomas and his build, and you look at Evan Neal and his build. Does that? I mean, I can't help thinking that Evan Neal would benefit from. He seems very top heavy, shifting his weight, his bulk around, and changing his body in the off season. Would that help him speed up, focus on the feet? It seems like they're just, and you're seeing it across the NFL. These edge rushers are just incredible, and the tackles just can't keep up.
Well, 2 of the best left tackles to me in the league right now is Trent Williams and Tyron Smith of the Niners and the Cowboys, respectively. So just give you an idea, because I'm looking it up as we speak, because it's an interesting point you bring up. Both of those guys pretty much are identical build. It's amazing. They're both 6'5",
330.
6'5", 320.
Yeah, that's about right.
Exactly where both are listed. So Evan Neal in comparison is 6'8", 350. So he's got 3 inches and he's got more mass, which is what we're just talking about.
The one thing I'll fight back on you, Jay, I don't think Evan Neal's top heavy. Like, you look at him, he's not
he's
sloppy.
slender.
Like he's got a big rear end. Quite frankly, Evan Neal's got a big rear end and he's got big thighs. That's where he carries a lot of his weight. Like, he doesn't have a gut. He's not huge up top. Like, I think his weight's actually distributed just fine, to be honest with you. If you remember back to the draft process last year, Jay, we were amazed that when he showed up here and we saw him in the hallway that he was 350 pounds. The guy does not look fat. It's crazy.
He does look like he has narrow knees, though. You can see it.
I have not measured his knees.
I have. Yeah,
well, you've been too busy checking out the other body parts, so based on your description. So, you can only manage so much. Go ahead, Jay. Yeah, we're listening.
Last question I wanted to ask is about Tommy DeVito, and I hear this weird report. And I just want to confirm it. Is it true that he doesn't warm up before games? I imagine he does stretching and things like that, but he's not out there throwing with the receivers before the game. Is that true?
I did not. Where'd you see that? I did not see that. That's news to me.
I swear I've seen it in interviews where it's come up with even the players being asked about it. But maybe I don't want to start anything. I
haven't heard anything about that.
I thought it was such a
check it out, Don. See what you can find. All right. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate the call, man. I'm going to send producer Dom to see if he can find out where that might have came from.
Yeah, I'm doing a search right now. I haven't heard anything either. But, I mean, listen, it's possible that maybe a teammate of somebody said, well, let's see.
Maybe he didn't warm up before one of those games because it was raining or something like that. I don't know.
So this is an article from November 27th. The title is Giants wide receiver reveals Tommy DeVito's weird pregame habit. And this is by Kevin Manahan of NJ Advanced Media. So let's see who the wide receiver is that was going through the pregame routine. This is Jalen Hyatt. This is a quote from Jalen Hyatt. With Tommy, first of all, he doesn't throw at warm-ups. At first, when I saw that, I was like, he didn't throw at warm-ups? What quarterback doesn't throw at warm-ups? But he goes out there, throws beautiful passes, so that just shows me how confident he is in himself and with his team.
I don't. Look, I'm outside doing the pregame show, so I'm not there to watch warm-ups. But I will set somebody to make sure they watch warm-ups.
I usually shoot warm-ups. I never took note to it.
About whether
keep an eye on
Yeah.
it.
Well, Dom, do me a favor. Watch that for me today.
Post also posted this. They posted an article with the same thing. Hyatt saying that he doesn't throw warm-ups.
Yeah, here's another quote. Hyatt was asked, does he ask Tommy why he doesn't warm up? And he said, quote, he's like, I don't have to. I think it's one of those things where he's a game player, and that's what I respect about him most. We know when he goes out there on game day. So honestly, I don't question anything about what he does and doesn't do.
I missed that one. I didn't see that. That was, I think that 27, that's like right around Thanksgiving, right? Yeah. We hosted this year, and I had pneumonia, so I probably missed that week when I was half dead.
I'll be in boots on the ground.
No, you were staring at Evan Neal's body parts. Come on. Let's get to the truth. But yes, anyway. I mean, once again, everybody's got a different pregame routine. You know, some players go out there with no shirt on because they like to embrace the cold. I wouldn't necessarily read much into it or anything
I've never heard of a quarterback not throwing in warm-ups because they have a pretty long period with the quarterbacks throwing to their tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers.
Well, what I would be curious is, does he do something else before he gets out on the field?
That's a good question,
You know,
too.
is he doing
Yeah,
something behind closed doors? Is he doing something out on the practice field at the facility before the game? I don't know. You know, that wasn't asked based on the quotes I read from Jalen Hyatt. But
it sounds like
their own.
Ty did like a podcast interview or something like that, and then somebody listened to it, and then they just wrote a story about it. That's kind of my feel for the article. But I don't know. Now I'm interested. I wish I would have known that before I would have asked Tommy about that in my interview with him. I had no idea that was a thing. All right, let's go to Big Ed in Maryland. Big Ed, what's going on?
Hey guys, what's up? I really am in shock right now. I can't believe what's happening to me right at this very moment.
Talking to us?
I'm talking to Big John and Big
I was being sarcastic.
Oh my gosh, what's up?
What do you got, man?
I miss y'all, man.
We're good.
Man, what do I got? I got us winning tonight, us winning next Sunday against New Orleans, us beating Philly in Philly on Christmas Day. And then the most important game, got us beating the Rams on New Year's Eve. And I ain't forgot about that game, man. That Flipper Anderson game, man. I'm still hurting about that one, man.
I'm surprised you picked that one as opposed to the one when they came here and scored 51 points. You're still going back to Flipper?
Nothing.
Well,
yeah, man, the 89 game when they beat us to knock us out the playoffs and came here and hurt us bad, we got to beat them for that. And then we got to win the last game against Philly just to get in to be straight. Please tell me I'm right. If we win out.
If the Giants win out, they'll be in the playoffs.
are they?
Yeah.
Do they win all tiebreakers in those scenarios?
I don't think it's clinched, but I would be very shocked if they went out and go 9-8 and beat all those teams, and their NFC record ends up being as good as it would be, because these are all NFC games the rest of the way, right? Yeah. I would be.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a control your own destiny situation at this point. It's too late in the year. There's still too many games left to be played for that. But I think the Giants would be in very, very, very good shape. But Ed, how about you worry about winning one game first?
Yeah.
Before you start worrying about
4 in the conference, that would be their
which is pretty good.
Yeah.
We know we got to do it one game at a time, of course, but just looking at the projectile, we got Tommy V, a.k.a. Jeff Hostetler, 15 again, 15 now. And then
he loves his 80s comparisons and his 90s comparisons, Big Ed. Yes.
And Paul's not even on the show.
Yeah, I know. Well, that fills the cup of tea that we needed without Paul.
And here's the other thing, man. Never mind him not practicing before the game. So what? The guy goes in with sheer confidence to know that
he practices. He doesn't throw, perhaps. There's a distinct difference between not practicing and not throwing.
Right. But see, run mostly Saquon tonight. We contain this Green Bay trying to do some offense. They got lucky these last few games. I've seen a few plays. They got lucky. But it's like we played that right D on them. We got them. Ooh, we got them. And the guys just fly all over the ball. Don't let nobody get behind you, and we got it.
He simplifies football so much, Big Ed.
Yeah.
Makes it look so easy. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, Big Ed. You snap your fingers, you go out and win a football game.
No.
Tremendous.
Right.
He wins 5 football games.
Five football
He
games.
wins 5
Excuse me.
football
Yes.
games.
Got to be
There you
politically
go. Come on.
correct. Yes. Yeah. And against
Hey,
the
guys,
team that you
I might-
haven't
I might
solved
be in
in
New
quite some
Orleans.
time. Yeah.
Look, I might be in New Orleans, right, for my birthday. You know.
Find
Right?
Paul.
For the
Yeah.
New Orleans
Paul
game.
runs
That'd be
Bourbon
great.
Street when we go down to New Orleans, Big Ed. So just find
Yeah.
the party. That's where you'll find Paul, and you guys can celebrate your birthday together.
Yes, with the beaded chains and
God,
everything.
man.
Shirtless
Paul.
with the beaded
Oh,
chain, of
that's-
course.
that's right. Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
look, I'm gonna go to Tommy's house and get some cutlets, man.
Well, hey, I'm sure the family will invite you right in. There's no doubt about it. You could explain to him
right.
why he shouldn't continue to throw before football games. I'm sure they would be more than happy to hear your animated take on that. We appreciate the phone call, Big
Thank
Ed.
you, Big Ed.
Yes.
Appreciate the call, man.
Yes.
Good stuff. And hopefully you will enjoy the game down in New Orleans. One game at a time, Big Ed. One game at a time.
Well, that's if you go back to the archives of Big Blue Kickoff Live, I guarantee you we've had a phone call from Big Ed like that
Oh,
in
of course.
every
Yeah,
single
yeah,
season.
yeah.
They're going to
And-
win
and God bless
17
them.
straight games. Don't worry about it. It's not going to be a problem.
Big Ed's got his thing. He's positive. He's happy. He has a good time. He has fun, and we love it. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Let's go back to the phones and say what's up to Donnie in Queens. Hi, Donnie.
Hey, guys. John, I know you're a Knick guy. Real quick, did you see the unfortunate Mitchell Robinson news?
I did not see the Mitchell Robinson news today. What is it?
8 to 10 weeks. He's got surgery coming.
Oh, but with knee or ankle? What is it?
8 to 10 weeks.
What,
Ankle.
it's an ankle? Jeez. Yeah, that's not great. They don't have a ton of
Yeah.
depth there either.
He was having a great year.
He was
having a great year for us.
I mean, he could have been a legit all-defensive team guy this year. He was playing so well. That's no good. Well, it also explains why he played so poorly the last 2 games against the Bucks and Celtics. But anyway, on to the Giants.
Unfortunately.
That stinks.
Hey, so with the Giants tonight, I like the matchup for our defense. I mean, typically, the last couple of years, it's really the teams that can spread us out but also run with power that have given us the most problems. I don't see that happening, and I think with the weather tonight, I certainly expect the defense to come to play and keep them under 20 points. Whether the offense can muster up some points or not, that's another story. So, weird feeling. I don't think ever watched a game where my team can move up to 4th in the draft, but also move within a game of a playoff spot. This late,
Yes, it's very weird.
Late in the season. So kind of the unintended consequences of expanding the field. You look at the AFC, it's great because there's all these teams. And the NFC is the opposite, it's just very, very top heavy. So still very curious as to why Tyrod's not starting tonight. And I know we've had the conversation on this show about tanking. And while I don't think the Giants are tanking and not trying to win the game, it doesn't seem to me they're putting their best foot forward in terms of trying to win the game tonight. And I think Dable kind of exposed himself where if Tommy goes out tonight and craps the bed and has to go back to Tyrod the next game, it's going to be one of those things that's easily second guessable. But do have a good feeling. I kind of have a feeling the defense sets us up for a score tonight, and I'm going to take the Giants 19-17. So good luck to you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, Donnie. It is odd, though, how you were like 1 game away from 4th in the draft and 1 game away from like the playoffs, depending on how this game goes tonight. It just shows you how tightly packed the NFC is. It's crazy.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's also a product of what the last caller was talking about when they expanded to 7 games. Remember, if we were at 6 teams, I should say, it would be, to me, a completely different story.
Yeah, because the Vikings are 7-6, and that's a 2-game gap.
2 versus 3 tells a whole different story. So
No, you're right about that.
That's really what it comes down to. It's
And
no
guess
different
what?
than the NBA with the play-in tournament.
That's why the league did it. Right? That's why the league expanded to 7.
of course.
So they get more teams in the mix here with the chance to make the playoffs late.
Yeah, it
by
keeps things
design.
competitive, sure, and there's also the almighty dollar as well that comes into the equation. But, yeah, I understand why they did it. I don't think anything was broke. So I wasn't necessarily campaigning to fix it. I like the 4 division winners and the 2 wild cards, but we have that much more meaningful football to talk about down the stretch, which is not necessarily a bad thing. As far as power running,
And you also get 2 more playoff games on Wild Card Weekend, which isn't a bad thing either.
I think A.J. Dillon is a power runner.
Oh,
so
he is.
I would disagree
Absolutely.
with the sentiments that they're not going to be tested in that department. And this is taking into consideration, even if Aaron Jones doesn't play, Dillon is a tough guy to bring down.
And like I mentioned, they have a good offensive line.
Yeah, so if he runs up the gut at Dexter, he runs to the side, Dillon could take guys with him.
To his point, I think it is more of a zone running scheme than it is like a downhill power running scheme. Maybe that's what he meant, because it's the classic McVay zone scheme, all that sort of stuff.
But meaning he could take on
no, sure he can.
players and he can pick up an extra yard or 2, especially if you're not in position to bring him down.
And by the way, that to me is the difference, not to get off topic briefly, but I will, why the Eagles aren't the same this year. They just have not been able to dominate on the ground in some games this year the way they have in years past. Maybe Jalen Hurts not running as well because of him being banged up as part of that. I think the running back change has something to do with it too. Swift makes some big runs. I'm not sure he is consistently bruising between the tackles as maybe the guys they had last year. And frankly, I think maybe losing Isaac Seumalo on the offensive line has hurt them a little bit. Cam Jurgens is more of a athletic, smaller, undersized guy, and he can't move people the way Seumalo did. So I think you put all those three things, and then I think losing Shane Steichen's part of it too, right? Look what Shane Steichen's done with that Colts running game. Zach Moss, who was a minimum player. I mean, he was basically did not have much interest around.
Well, he was the forgotten guy in the Buffalo backfield.
Discarded him, right? And he's come in and rushed for 1,000 yards. So I think all those things together have kind of changed the dynamic of the Eagles in terms of their offense. I think the bigger issue is their defense.
That's where I was going to go. That's what I think really is.
I think I agree with you. Bigger issue is their defense. I think if you look at what's different on offense, they were the best running team in football last year. They are not anywhere near that this year, which I do think is a bit of a change on offense. Now, maybe game flow, too. You don't have as many leads. So you're not running it quite as much as you.
Yeah, they played a lot of close games this season.
Maybe that's part of it, too. So you're not playing with leads and, just pounding teams in the second half.
Perhaps the biggest factor, yeah.
It isn't, to me, the running game's not as dynamic. And then spine of their defense, right? They lost all their linebackers. They lost all their safeties. And they just don't look the same down the middle of the field, which is a problem.
Yeah, and they got even more banged up last night, especially with Reed Blankenship going out early in that game as he took a hit to the helmet. And they brought in Shaq Leonard, coincidentally, who was with Shane Steichen in the Indianapolis Colts, but he has ties to Nick Sirianni from their Indy days. The middle of that Eagles defense is a liability right now. If you can attack the middle of the field and you force those guys to tackle and you force some of those linebackers to cover, that's where you have success. So that, to me, is the biggest difference. But I'm with you. I do think there are some changes to the dynamics of the run game. I think just like late last season, it's interesting. Jalen got banged up late last season. Remember, Gardner came in and filled in. Okay, Jalen's playing this year, but I don't think he's looking to take on as much contact. And Miles Sanders was the running back you were referencing, who went to Carolina. A little bit different style runner than DeAndre Swift. I mean, they still have Kenneth Gainwell, but are they running over teams? Are they the type of team that last year you would see them go 9 plays, they wouldn't even throw the ball? You knew they were running it. They knew they were running it. No, they're not going on those 9 plays, 80-some-odd yard drives. Yep. I'll give you that. That definitely has changed.
201-939-4513. Steve in Staten Island will wrap us up today. Steve, what's going on?
How are you, gentlemen? How you doing today?
We're good.
How are you, Lance?
Doing all right. Yep. What's happening?
Good. Listen, I got to tell you, it just doesn't get any better than this if you're a Giants fan right now. I mean, come on, 1 game out of the last wild card spot. I mean, I get it. You got to play the games. But December football is supposed to be fun, especially if your team is playing meaningful December football. All right, I'll be honest with you. I'm probably in a minority. Screw the draft. I don't care what number we are in the draft because there is no one player that you're going to draft that's going to make an immediate impact on this team next year. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, play the games, win the games, have fun.
Of course.
And I'm telling you, I don't know tonight, John. I'm telling you, I think Okereke is going to go off. I don't know what it is. I'm just getting a feeling tonight.
He's a good player.
Okereke is going to have a banner game, brother.
No,
he's already had 2, I would say,
awesome.
in a row. Yeah.
Look, Bobby Okereke, and I'm not trying to go over the top here.
He
is literally, Steve.
For you guys when you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. He's literally maybe the Giants' best free agent signing since that 2011 Super Bowl team. That's how good he's been this year. You can make the argument
16,
again.
Maybe.
Again, I was going to say Snacks, Vernon, Jenkins. That was just for 1 year, and Okereke's just been 1 year. But I think he has the potential to really be a truly impactful free agent signing.
And listen, I'll tell you something else, too. Micah McFadden's game stepped up because of Okereke.
Yeah, he's helped.
And that's what you want out of your linebacking core. You can't ask for anything better than that. Thibodeau looks like he's – and listen, I'll be the first to admit I was really on him after the second game. I'll fall on a sword. I'll say it. I was like the bust. I said it, and I'm admitting it, and I'm wrong, and I'm eating crow. And you know what?
Hey, good for you, Steve.
Crow every day, bro, and I'm not going to lie about it. But I have a question. I don't know. Again, I just haven't really got a chance to listen to you last week.
Yeah.
But I just turned you on late today. But why aren't the Giants at least trying to bring in Zach Ertz? Now I know he's holding out. He wants a playoff team. But listen, Zach Ertz is another ex-player on an NFC rival team that just destroyed the Giants through the years. When they signed Cole Beasley, the first thing I said to myself was, this guy tore us up with those slants when he played for Dallas. Zach Ertz is a typical old-school bruiser tight end, because I've been saying for years, listen, I think that's what they need to go back to, too, if we're talking tight end. They got to get back to the old school. Big body bruiser, a guy that can just plow people over, because if you guys notice through the years, that was successful. From Boss to Ballard to Martellus Bennett, those were successful. And listen, I'm just curious, do you think they'll make a play for him to try and get him in? I mean, he can block. Zach Ertz can pretty much do a lot with an offense. Thank you guys for taking my call. You guys are the best. I'm sure we'll talk again. Be well, my friends.
Thank you, Steve. You too. Steve. Good call. Look, I don't know whether or not the Giants have reached out to Zach Ertz or not. So maybe they have, and that's just not out there. I don't know. But I think, Steve, you answered your own question. Zach Ertz says he wants to play for a team that's going to compete for a title. I mean, at 4-8, as optimistic as Bedhead might have been, I don't think you would necessarily, if you're a player looking at things objectively, you would put them in that conversation.
On top of that, they have Daniel Bellinger, and Waller could very well be coming back down the stretch. So then do you really need Zach Ertz under those circumstances if you have Waller and Bellinger back? And I think it's more about evaluating the guys that are currently under contract as opposed to renting Zach Ertz for the final 4 or 5 games. Plus, remember, there's also the money involved. Yeah. Zach Ertz may want to go to a team with a winning record. That doesn't mean that he doesn't want to play for nothing. That's
correct.
The other thing.
That's the other thing.
Okay? You got to have money to also lure him in, regardless of limited games being left. So I think those two factors are huge question marks in terms of applying that to whether or not he would fit into the Giants equation.
Hey, look, and then let me say this, too, based on the call that Donnie had before. He talked about if they have to end up pulling Tommy and they put Tyrod back in there. That's fine. That's why you have Tyrod Taylor here, right? You're seeing what you have in Tommy DeVito. You're seeing if he can prove his way next year. Maybe he could be your primary backup if he plays well enough. And if he plays that well and he can be your primary backup, then he's going to stay on the field. But if he starts to falter and things go poorly, Brian Daboll never went out there and said he's starting the rest of the last 5 games.
No, he didn't commit to him the rest of the way.
He never said that. Heck, would it shock me that if it's a close game and the Giants are not moving the ball at all in the second half, we could see Tyrod get put in this week? Like, I wouldn't be fall off my chair shocked by that. There's nothing to say that couldn't possibly happen. And that's why I think one of the reasons you stick with Tommy, right, is that it's easier to slide back to Tyrod than to go to Tyrod and then go back to Tommy again. Then you're really yo-yoing the kid. So he's played well. He won 2 straight games. Let him continue. And then if you have to go back to Tyrod at some point because, Tommy isn't playing as well, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you have to take all your contingencies into consideration here. That's a move you can make if you decide that you want to.
Well, I think it goes back to, and this is what you were hinting at, Tommy hasn't given them a reason to bench him at this point.
Correct.
When the reason develops, then you can then make a change at quarterback. So I think that's the other reason why the Giants are sticking with him. They've won football games. He's protected the ball. He's made good decision-making for the most part. So if that changes, then you say, okay, hey, the competition has improved. Tommy hasn't been able to match what he did against Washington and New England. We're going to go back to the more experienced quarterback. But we're not there yet.
Right.
When we are there, I don't think, I know the caller was hinting at, well, then maybe it doesn't make Brian Daboll look good. I disagree. I think you then have rationale at that point for Brian to explain why he wants to make a change. Right now, you don't have overwhelming evidence to say we have to go back to Tyrod Taylor. And I'll say what I said last week again. The offense hasn't been drastically different, John, whether it's Daniel Jones, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, whether it's Tommy DeVito. If it was drastically different, then I would say maybe the coaching staff should rethink this. That evidence doesn't exist right now.
It's almost like what's happening around the quarterback is really important and impacts how the quarterback plays.
Without a doubt. He can only put on the cape so much and make everything else problem-wise disappear. So
just go look at
that's
Patrick.
The other factor.
Just look. Excuse me. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback on the planet, all right? When all is said and done, he will be, there's a good chance he's going to be considered one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Does Patrick Mahomes look like his old self this year? Without 2 good starting offensive tackles and a bunch of wide receivers that can't catch the football and have no idea where they're running on their routes?
A lot of mental mistakes.
He looks like a different player, doesn't he? The Chiefs' offense certainly isn't the same. Is Patrick Mahomes no good? Did he forget how to play football? No. What happens around the quarterback impacts how a quarterback plays. Look at Justin Herbert. Didn't Justin Herbert forget how to play football? What do you think is because he lost Mike Williams and the running game hasn't been as good? Like, there's a million reasons.
Offensive line too.
Yeah, there's a million reasons why these why the play of these quarterbacks fluctuate, and it's not always about the quarterback. It's about what's going on around them.
That's why.
That's it.
That's why the teams that win consistently, even if they don't win a Super Bowl, I consider that a heck of an achievement.
Sure.
Because of what you just said. It's hard to do it year in and year out. And when you can be in competition to win divisions, get wild card spots, make it to the playoffs. That's why, for example, I don't want to get off topic, but Steelers fans, be careful what you wish for.
Oh,
if you continue to campaign to get rid of Mike Tomlin. Be very careful what you wish for.
Right.
Because to have as long of a reign as he's had without that team falling under 500, that may not be Super Bowl year in and year out, but sign me up for that. Sign me up for an opportunity to be in the playoff hunt every single year going back to 2007.
Because then when you find your next Roethlisberger, guess what? You're going to be competing for Super Bowls.
Because you have the right management in place.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And again, that's also what makes Patrick Mahomes special. You put a middling quarterback with what's going around him in Kansas City, that team might be well under 500.
And the defense has helped a lot, by the way, this season, too.
Have not played as well the last few weeks, but
no,
they
but
were wonderful.
Probably a big reason why they're
100%.
still where they are in the standings.
No,
what Steve Spagnuolo has been able
correct.
to do.
This is the last thing I'll say, by the way. Guys, and this is, I know the Chief fans are upset, and I understand the heat of the moment. They probably didn't look at how egregious it was. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are upset. The guy was past the football.
Oh, yeah.
He was lined up more like a defensive player than an offensive player. The rule is you have to be behind the back of the football. He was in front of the football. How long is a football? Like a foot long, 15 inches long, whatever it is? So he's at least a foot offsides. The referee in the post-game pool reporter Q&A said the reason the side judge called the foul, Toney was so far offsides, he couldn't see the football to judge offsides and false starts when it got snapped. That's how far offsides he was. So, yes, would you prefer to not have a call like that at the end of the game, takeaway, which was one of the most unbelievable plays that I've ever seen late, close in an important NFL game? No, it stinks. It's terrible. But guess what? You have to make that call. You have to. You have to. Line up in the right spot. Check with the official on the sideline, which, by the way, if he checks with the official is going to give him one of these.
Yeah, to move back a little bit.
Back up.
Yeah.
And then he backs up. But he couldn't even do that. So, sorry, guys. It stinks. I get why you're upset. I understand. The pass interference 2 weeks ago, you're probably still mad about that. That was egregious. I get that. But that's it. Flag 100 times out of 100 times this season. It just is.
I mean, if that happens with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter, you call that too. I mean, I think they're very animated because of when it happened in the game. And
I
there's
hate
been a lot of
this.
these calls.
You got to swallow your whistles late.
No,
well,
call it evenly across the board.
Calling a foul that's not there is just as egregious as not calling a foul that is there. So you're basically telling teams that they can just break whatever rule they want in the last 2 minutes and you shouldn't throw a flag. Hold anyone, go off sides, false start.
Yeah.
Oh, it's late. Your referee shouldn't decide the game. No, if you break the rules, you get penalized. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's another reason why, if you remember Jim Irsay, the owner,
I've been stewing about this all morning.
Colts, I could tell. I don't know. I don't know what gave it away, but slightly could tell. Jim Irsay, if you remember, when the Colts played the Browns earlier this season, and there were calls that they admitted were wrong, and it happened in the final 2 minutes, he was saying that everything should be under review in the final 2 minutes, which is another overreaction. Well, hold on a minute. If those offenses happen with 2 minutes to go in the second quarter, don't you think that adds up?
Which could impact the game just as much.
So my feeling is, why are we putting it under the microscope just because it's the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter? I would argue you want to get things right no matter when they take place in the game.
I agree. And that doesn't mean you should review everything because we'll be sitting there forever.
And I'm the last person that would be campaigning for that. Yeah.
And I know you weren't. I just wanted to make sure that
because
fans might think that's the point you were making. And I know you because I know you weren't.
Yeah.
But look, it is what it is, guys. It's unfortunate. You don't like to see it, but a foul's a foul, a penalty's a penalty, and if it's a penalty in the first half, it's a penalty in the second half. That's just the way it goes. And by the way, it was still second down to 15. Like, they had three more downs to try to go make a play. And even if they score a touchdown there, There's still over a minute 30 seconds. The Bills have multiple timeouts. They could come down and win the game still. So it's not like that was the last play of the game and, they had no other chance to make up for it either. There was still plenty of football left to go after that, too.
Well, it reminds me, once again, when the Saints-Rams, that missed call, last time I checked, they went to overtime. Drew Brees threw an interception. Nobody wants to talk about that.
That was the wrong call. Like, I get it. You get mad because the referee misses a obvious call. That's fine. You're getting mad that the official made the right call.
Sure, yeah.
Like, come on.
But I guess I'm saying, regardless of whether it was the right or the wrong call, there was ample time to make up for whatever your emotions were swinging left and right.
Totally get it.
I will say this. The best thing that could come from this is Andy Reid and that entire offensive staff, you put that film up and you emphasize to every single one of your wide receivers from this point on, every time you line up, you get in the habit of looking to the official on the outside. You double check with them to make sure you're lined up appropriately, and that should never happen again.
What I don't understand is that Kadarius Toney's staring at the football.
He's looking inward as opposed to outward.
First of all, he's looking backwards at the football. He's so far up. He's like, what was the ball? It's back there?
But he never looked towards the outside, is my point.
Yeah, but he should see that he's offsides when he's looking at the football. Well, anyway, that's all I got.
Yep.
Thank you, Lance.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dom. Good stuff. Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. For Lance Meadow, for Dom, I'm Schmelk. We'll see you next time tomorrow at 12:30. I believe it's Howard and I on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Is Matt under the switch? We'll see you then.